All right. I hope everybody's enjoying their meals. And I'd like to just give a quick round of applause to the VICC staff for serving us such a wonderful dinner tonight. Let's give them a round. Now, just before we introduce our keynote speaker, I want to introduce our head table for the evening. I ask you to hold your applause until we get through the full list here. So we have Dallas Smith, President of the Nanaimo Olas Council and our conference chair, Chief Chris Roberts from We Become First Nation, Erica Roberts from Nanaimo Olas Council, the Honorable Sheila Malcolmson, Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction for the Government of BC, Kendra Johnston, the Assistant Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Mining and Critical Minerals, Kate Mueller, Vice President Sustainability from North Isle Copper and Gold, Elder Lolly Good from Siniva First Nation, and of course our keynote speaker this evening, Bill Lomax, President and CEO from the First Nations Bank of Canada. So let's give them all a round of applause. So with that, I'd like to invite our conference chair, Dallas Smith, back to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker. I will let you all know that I think there is a little bit of food left, so if you want to grab a quick snack, you can head out there. Otherwise, let's bring Dallas up and get our evening on the way. Dallas.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, I have another hat on. I believe it's the fourth hat of this conference. I'm not vain, but I might have two more for tomorrow. So, what a day. What a day. It was nice. We were just talking at the table about someone asked me what my favorite part of the day was, and it was standing here, trying to do the math in my head, 10 hours ago or so, and just feeling the energy of the people who are here, the people who understand what it takes to get things done in this province. Obviously, there's always challenges. It doesn't matter. I've been doing this for a long time now. I've had the honor of working with 5 premiers, 3 prime ministers now, and none of them have gotten it right. But the next one always gets it a little bit better. And that's because people like us come together in rooms like this and Prince George and Vancouver conferences where we sit down and we talk about the goals that we're trying to achieve. We don't focus on the problems. You don't start by focusing on the problems. You map out where you want to get to, and then you talk about how you're going to get there. And then you talk about the obstacles along the way, and you find ways to mitigate them. And that procedure and that process, that framework, if you will, is so important right now. As I was mentioning, the despair around First Nations reconciliation and people wanting to blame First Nations for the way the economy is dragging right now. And that's just simply not the truth. Every First Nations community that is part of events like this want to see a better future. We don't want to be status quo of the places that we grew up in. And that floor, as I said this morning, is starting to rise more and more. And, again, Auntie Lolly just brings that energy back into the room. I was sitting at the hotel relaxing a little bit before I came back over, and I walked out of the elevator and I could hear those maracas. And I was like, I wonder how many people she got. Did she get 40% of the room like a few years ago? Did she get 60% of the room like 2 years ago? Did she have 80% of the room like last year? I walked in and 95% of the room was all engaged, so thank you, Elder. The Snuneymuxw people have always opened their arms to us since we started having this conference over 10 years ago, and they've always participated, and they've always opened up their house, and I think that's why it feels like a family reunion to me. It's like I'm at Auntie Lolly's house, and we're here visiting, and all my cousins are going to get to sleep on the floor, and they're going to threaten to put vapor rub on our eyes so we keep our eyes closed while they play cards after, and those kinds of things. But we do have some challenges along the way. But we have so many tools in the toolbox now that are going to help us mitigate through those. And as my brother Robert Phillips talked about, there's many tools in the toolbox. He talked about it a little more passionately than I thought he was going to today, but he was making a point that these are simply tools that we need to use to help us when we need them. And I hope the government of the day, future governments, continue to listen to discussions that happen at places like this, where we're talking about the result, we're talking about the goal, we're talking about the destination, we're talking about how many people are going to benefit from that at the end of the day. So it's really fitting for our keynote speaker to come in and pull this together as, again, as I talked about, 80, 90 years ago, we couldn't congregate in a place like this. But tonight, we have the President and CEO of the First Nations Bank of Canada and a member of the Gitxsan Nation here to help talk to us about some of these evolutions and some of these opportunities and some of these tools. So I told Bill I wasn't going to steal all of his time like a couple years ago when he agreed to be one of the keynote speakers. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend Bill Lomax. Come on up, Bill.
Simigigat, Sigaram Hanak, Ganakubil Wilksit. Tuyaksi Nisam Tun, Ame Yuksak Tun. Maska Lewis, why Lagabu, Wilbs Loose, Gitsan Ni. Amaya Snanemuch. Amaya Elder Lolly. Ladies, gentlemen, two-spirited friends, good evening. And thank you to the Snuneymuxw Nation for welcoming us onto your traditional territory. And thank you, Elder Lolly, for that wonderful opening. And Dallas and team here for putting together this fantastic event. I want to start tonight with a simple truth, because I think it sets the tone for the rest of what I want to share with you tonight. We're sitting in the early chapters of what I believe will be the next great Canadian growth story. And the people in this room are the ones that are going to write it. Now, that's not just a polite line for the keynote opening. I mean that literally. 20 years from now, people are going to look back at the Canadian economy and try to identify where the most interesting growth came from. And they're going to point to Indigenous economies. They're going to point to the work that you, as real-world practitioners working for nations right now, the work that you're doing to build those nations' businesses. I want to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from so that you know the lens that I'm using here. So I am President and CEO for First Nations Bank of Canada. We're the only Indigenous-owned bank in the country, Schedule I bank in the country. We have about $1.5 billion in assets. Our business is really all about helping First Nations communities acquire and build operating businesses, build wealth, and put real economic infrastructure in place that's going to last for generations and last from, going to outlast the local current council and leadership changes, all the political cycles. These are businesses that are going to be with the nations for generations. Before I came here, I spent a long stretch on Wall Street, most recently at Goldman Sachs. It's one of the, I built one of the biggest wealth management businesses in the country. It's bigger than most of the wealth management businesses that you'll see locally. And I did it working for tribal nations. I've seen wealth creation, and I see it coming here. I'm Gitxsan, as mentioned, from northern BC. It's about a 16-hour drive to Vancouver, where I grew up from. And it's just not the kind of place where you expect to become president and CEO of a bank or to spend time on Wall Street. It just isn't. But here I am. And I tell you I'm not really trying to tell you that as my resume, because that's not really what's important. But I want you to understand that I've seen what it looks like for this community, for this kind of economy, from the inside the belly of the beast, from the biggest of institutions. And I also see it from the side of the nations, I sit on our Economic Development Corporation for my nation. And I can tell you what I see coming is really big. And I think it's bigger than what most people are really expecting. And, you know, what's interesting about this, I think the most important part of it is not what we see in the headlines. So I want to push the conversation a little bit because I think we're collectively looking at the wrong thing. There's a lot of fantastic major projects underway out there, and there's a lot more to come. And they're going to create significant opportunities for Indigenous equity stakes, right? If we take a look here in BC, we have LNG Canada Phase 2 at Kitimat, but there's tens of billions of dollars in projects that are coming across the country. Every one of those is on First Nations or Indigenous land, right? And they're going to be supported by the biggest funds in the world. There's going to be billions upon billions flowing into our communities. And you know what? I don't want to talk about those projects at all. Well, maybe just a little. But the reason I don't want to talk about these projects because others are going to give them the focus that they deserve, right? They're going to be in the headlines. We're going to hear all about them, right? They're going to be successful whether I cheer them on or not. So instead, I want to talk about what I like to call the missing middle, right? What's the missing middle? It's the deals that are too big to be small, too small to be big, right? It's not the gas stations and not the pipelines, but everything in between. So if we think about metal manufacturing companies chasing major contracts, catering companies feeding mining camps, forestry services firms that are working up and down the island here, the trucking companies that help take the logs out, right? The urban reserves, and there's a fantastic one coming here, by the way, the urban reserves that are building economic infrastructure in the city, right? All of these things, that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about the missing middle. And it's where the opportunity lies for most Indigenous communities. Not everybody's going to get to play with a participant in a pipeline or some other major project, but everybody has the opportunity in the missing middle. So if we think about, it's part of the story that gets the least attention, really. I think that's really what I'm trying to say is like, we've got all this stuff going on that really is not making the headlines, right? These major projects, they're going to take care of themselves. When we hear about Indigenous participation in major projects, it's usually the equity portion that gets all of the attention, right? And I get it, you know, equity is kind of sexy. Everybody here think it's sexy? No, I guess not. It sounds important though, and it looks impressive, right? Often there's really big numbers associated with this. But here's the thing, equity in major projects, while it's, you know, very good for the nation, it's a long game. Rarely do you start to see the cash flow coming in the early stages of these projects, right? It's going to be valuable over time, but for today, it doesn't really make much of a difference, right? Meanwhile, our nations have real-world issues right now, right? We have housing, infrastructure, elder care, social programs, employment, all these real-world needs right now that need capital today, not 10 or 20 years down the road. Procurement, on the other hand, creates immediate economic impact. It means Indigenous nations and businesses are earning profits today, sharing in the value of the building of these projects that we're talking about that shape our lands and our communities. It means good jobs, skills, development, and business growth right now, while still positioning us for long-term success. And beyond the dollars, procurement builds something more important, capacity, right? It gives people the chance to grow expertise, strengthening the enterprises that they own, and to be active participants in the nation building that they're doing within their communities. Not just as investors, but as doers, builders, and leaders. Now that said, I keep saying I don't want to talk about major projects and I keep coming back to it, so I apologize. But let's talk about them again for just a minute, because the math is too important to skip. Together, the major projects that have been approved by the federal government so far, that pipeline represents over $60 billion in investments, okay? All of this, again, on the traditional territories of First Nations and Indigenous communities. So there's billions of dollars of procurement can flow from any one of these projects. And we may see 20 to 30% available for qualified Indigenous-owned businesses, right? So if we get 20% of those projects flowing to Indigenous businesses, that would mean $12 billion in contracts. $12 billion. Think about that number for a minute. That's thousands of contracts, some worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, some worth a few thousand, each one an opportunity to support entrepreneurship in the community, to create jobs, and to create community revenue. So let's think about that number carefully. Are we really ready to manage $12 billion of procurement? The honest answer, not yet, right? And that's the gap I want every First Nations leader in this room thinking about. Not whether the opportunity is real. It's real, for sure. The question is about the capacity. Will that capacity be in place when the contracts hit the street? Procurement touches every part of a project. Skilled trades like carpentry, pipe fitting, electrical work, logistics, trucking, camp accommodations, environmental monitoring, catering, right down to supplying basic products like toilet paper, right? There's all these wide variety of things that a nation can do in procurement. And so, but if the nation doesn't have a company in place when this procurement comes, those contracts go elsewhere. And once that happens, they're gone, right? It's over. So the practical question for a lot of First Nations is becoming, how do we get a capable business in place fast enough to compete for the work that's about to be tendered? And we don't have that much time. In a lot of cases, the answer for this is acquisition. Find an existing company with a real track record, the right capabilities, and a founder is ready to think about succession. Buy it, make it your own, build it from there. I know some of you are thinking, well, it sounds a little bit like rent a feather, right? That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm talking about genuine mutual benefit. The company brings skill. The nation brings capital and access. The founder gets a real exit. The nation gets a real business. When you buy a business as a First Nation, the real upside is often not in just the cash flows that come from the existing business, but it's what you bring as a nation in terms of access to opportunities. You bring real value as First Nations owners. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean. So there's a wind power project, I won't get into where it is, but $450 million. So, fantastic project. Nation got 40% equity ownership in it. Amazing. But they got almost none of the procurement for it. $450 million in construction and costs to get this thing off the ground. You know, it just bypasses the community. And why is that? Because they didn't have businesses positioned to bid on all of these contracts. Imagine if they had already acquired local firms in excavation, road building, or electrical works before the construction began. The immediate benefits would have been transformational for them, right? So what about pipeline projects? We keep hearing about that. I imagine maybe Premier Eby talked a little bit about that last night. Nations now are securing equity in major energy corridors across the country. That's critical for their long-term revenue, but the procurement contracts, the trucking, the welding, camp services, all of these businesses, those could dwarf the equity returns that they're going to get from those projects. Oftentimes, these projects can generate $50 million or more from a single project. That's the kind of economic activity that creates jobs today while still building wealth for tomorrow. Kitsaki Management bought an environmental services company in Ontario. FMBC financed it well before other banks had programs to support these kind of moves. That's nation building in action. They're taking ownership, they're expanding their capacity, and they're reinvesting the profits back into their community. The pattern across all of these is the same. Equity stakes in big projects gets the headlines. The procurement that surrounds them and is involved in other areas, that's where the real-time cash flow lives. And the nations that do the best are the ones that understand both and build for both. For the First Nations leaders in this room, I want to spend a few minutes on what an acquisition can actually look like from your side. Because procurement opportunities flowing into your community are significant, and the question becomes, how do you capture that value? Well, one of the answers is, I've been alluding to, buying a stake or fully acquiring an established business that can help you with these contracts from day one. A couple of options we're thinking about. Option one is that you buy a stake in an existing company. Under this scenario, you buy maybe 51%, or more in an existing company that's doing good work, that is local enough that you can really understand it. And the advantage here is that you get a business with revenue, customers, and a management team already in place. You're not starting from zero, especially when you have big contracts coming your way. And once that company's partly yours, you can use that as an opportunity to take advantage of those contracts. So you're not only buying a company that's worth X dollars now, but with the contracting and procurement opportunities you have, you can make that 2X, 3X, make it a much more valuable company. Option two is you buy the company outright, right? And here's something to think about. 67% of Canadian business owners are contemplating an exit in the next 10 years. Most of them don't have a plan, their kids don't want to run the business, but they've been building their business all their lives. That's an extraordinary opening for you as First Nations if you have the capital and patience to act. In my experience, founders care about two real things. They want a fair price, and they care about the people that have been working for them, right? And what happens, and they care about what happens to them. So nations tend to deliver on both. You pay fairly, you keep management in place, and you grow the business. You don't saddle it with debt and flip it in 5 to 7 years the way a private equity company would. And that's often the other option that they have, right? So that reputation is becoming an advantage in the market for First Nations. Founders are starting to seek out Indigenous buyers because they know their legacy of their company is going to keep going after they leave if First Nations are in charge. They spent their lives building these companies. So partnering with established business, it's not about asking for a seat at the table, somebody else's table. It's about using the table that you already own. You have the rights, you have the territory, you have the procurement advantage, and increasingly, you have the financial power. So before I start working towards a close, I want to talk a little bit about the personal side of this work, because I know it can be very difficult. The work is hard, not in the abstract sense, but in very specific ways that every practitioner in this room knows, really a little too intimately. You're often translating between worlds that don't naturally understand each other. You're carrying the weight of communities that need the deal to work. And you're negotiating with counterparts where the institutional incentives don't always align with what your nation needs. That can really grind a person down. So I want to talk to you a little bit about something that's helped me through my career. My mother, Betsy, taught me about this before I had words for it. So when I was 8 years old, my mom took flying lessons. Pretty sure she was the first Indigenous woman in BC to do that. I thought it was so cool, right? And I begged her to take me up with her. And finally that day came. She was going to let me go up with her, but she didn't tell me. She did not tell me that that was the day she was going to learn to recover after the engine failed. So there we were, 10,000 feet, again and again, going down like this, dropping 50 feet a second, again and again and again. I'm holding on to the sick bag like it's a parachute. We survived. It was great. I was too young to understand it then. but she made a deliberate choice to bring me up that day, you know? She wasn't trying to explain something to me. She was trying to show me. She was trying to show me that as First Nations people, we could be in the driver's seat. We could be the ones that are handling very difficult situations in places where we aren't necessarily expected to be. And that we can not only survive, but we can take charge and we can make the situation work. So, when you have that day where you feel like you don't belong in the pilot's seat because the bottom keeps dropping out from under you, think of Betsy and take control and straighten out because you belong there. So what do we do with all this? To First Nations leaders, the time is now. Build capacity. Train your people, acquire the companies that will deliver. The procurement wave is here. So get out your surfboard, because the ones that are ready will be the ones to ride it. And for all of us in economic development and finance, our role is pivotal. Not in just funding mega projects, but in empowering nations to own, operate, and grow the businesses that are going to anchor prosperity for generations. The mega projects will get built with or without us. The missing middle will not. That's where economic development practitioners have the most leverage to do the work that actually matters. So in closing, I want to say, 20 years from now, we're going to see a new class of economic powerhouses in this country. Not corporations, nations. First Nations with diversified business portfolios, sophisticated investment arms, and real seats at tables in industries that currently don't know Indigenous capital is coming. The nations that move boldly in the next decade are going to define what Indigenous economic power looks like in this country for generations. The ones that wait, that stay cautious and sit on the sidelines, they're going to still be waiting when the window closes. This is a once-in-a-century opportunity to build something spectacular, and Indigenous communities are at the heart of it. Because when we talk about nation building in this country, let's be absolutely clear. It starts with First Nations. Amaya, thank you.
We'll go in the middle of the stage. Okay. Wow, another round of applause for Bill Lomax. I want to say he's probably the funniest Gitsan I've ever met, but there's three more in this room who I think might be a little bit funnier, but no, I mean, this is really what it's about, is more of these tools and more of these opportunities to understand what's in front of us. So, Bill, you're always there when we need, and I look forward to talking to you now as we're building opportunities. As I've been taking over the leadership responsibilities with my nation, we're building 100 houses over the next 5 years. We're going to build retail. We're going to do all these things, and we need to learn how to manage the equity and the success and the opportunity and be ready for those things. And so I really look forward to continuing the great relationship we've developed over the last couple of years. Also, what a meal. Wow, let's give a round of applause for the Vancouver Island Conference Center. It's always weird getting close to the end. While I was so excited to start, I realized, we're going to have an awesome opportunity to do some networking tonight. Those of you who are new to this may not have heard of the Res Dog Walkers. The Res Dog Walkers is my podcast that was born thanks to the imagination of C3 Alliance and the BCNRF and BC IROC, and we just wanted to try to find a platform to take these discussions for in between the conferences. And so who's listened to the podcast? Who out there's listened to the podcast? Wow. We only have 90 followers, so 2 of you are lying. Although my mom watches from 3 different devices, so it counts as all 3. But I really want to thank everybody for being here today, and I want to thank the words that were shared. I want to thank the opportunities that were discussed. I want to thank the challenges that were presented and mitigated and managed, and I want to just thank everybody who's helped this grow into something that it's become. I know we don't take it for granted. You know, there's so many conferences out there that you can invest your sponsorship dollars, that you can invest your time and energy in. And the fact that we went from 80 people 12 years ago to over 600 tonight just shows that we're heading down the right road. So I really want to thank you for coming down this journey with us. But I also want to invite you to the opportunity to come share some more time and some energy and enjoy some camaraderie at the Res Dogs After Dark party that's going to be happening shortly at the Coast Bastion Inn. And I'm not going to lie, we're going to go there and everybody's going to get, you know, some time to hang out, and some of us are going to have a couple cocktails, and some of us are going to have a little anti-fear juice, and the karaoke is going to be flowing at the bar across the street after. And last year, I think there was about 60 of us, 70 of us in that bar, and oh my God, can you all sing? I know Chief Chris Roberts is chomping at the bit for his opening act. I know Mr. Morris is in the back getting ready. He's probably getting his Garth Brooks hat ready, and he's going to be ready to go. Unfortunately, Isaiah Robinson isn't able to make it to share his Frank Sinatra with us this year, but I really want to thank people for just giving yourself to this event and coming to all these things. I go to a lot of conferences, and I'm not going to lie, there's a few things I'm like, oh, I'm probably just going to go catch up on some emails or something like that. But at BCI Rock, we seem to just participate. Everywhere we go, we think, okay, if we get 40, 50 people, it's going to be good, and we just get these overwhelming turnouts. So I want to thank you on behalf of the organizers and Numble Coast Council and C3 Alliance for just giving us this opportunity to help bring people together to talk about what's important. Thank you. And trust me, I'm just about done. I've learned as I'm giving my closing speeches for the night not to bring my glass of wine with me, so it's a little bit more succinct. And I've also learned to wear my glasses so I can actually read the wonderful production notes that the team has given me. So we're all learning as we go. This is adaptive management. This is AI as we're going here. But one other thing that I want to talk about is I think it's also important to recognize, and I don't want to take it down a somber mood by any ways, but I think it's important to recognize some of the people who didn't make it this year. And so if I can just ask for a moment of silence for some of the great chiefs that we've lost, and we've lost a lot since the last BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference. We've lost a lot of great chiefs who gave us the ability to spread our wings. We really take for granted, as I'm not a young First Nations leader anymore, but as a used to be young First Nations leader, we really took for granted a lot of the work that the Bill Wilsons and the Ed John, and I think of Dave Porter, and I think of Bill Erasmus, and I think of all the great leaders who just fought to get us the opportunity to be here to spread our wings. And we lost some of those great hereditary chiefs over the last year. So let's just take a moment of silence and not mourn their loss, but let's celebrate the fact that we're picking up where they left off, and we're continuing the discussion and continuing the battle. So let's just take 30 seconds of silence before we go on. Kayla Kessler. Thank you all so much. I think it's just important for us to not lose sight of the fact that we've gotten here for a reason, and there's people that have paid the price that many of us haven't paid. I think of some of the work, and I get a little bit frustrated sometimes that some people take where we are for granted. You know, the fact that we can come together and talk about some of the problems and some of the solutions isn't a luxury that we've always had. So it's really important as part of this conference to not only be focused on what's forward, but to remind us about what drives us. So I really thank you for letting me have the opportunity. This is really therapeutic for me. You know, I'm always busy. We're always trying to do what we can, and this conference is a little bit therapeutic for me. I feel like I'm on the couch and you guys are all, well, not quite Tony Soprano-ish, but a little less violence, but I really appreciate the opportunity that I can come up here and share my thoughts and feelings, and it means something to you all. So I just really want to thank that. And so now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to remind everybody, 8:30 tomorrow morning, or else I am going to make Logan have a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast. Anybody who's late, Logan's going to have to eat peanut butter because of it. So let's make sure we're here on time. I don't want to do that to him again. It was a hard lesson, but you learned it, didn't you, Logan? Where are you? You learned it. So, no, with all that said, I'm going to ask for one more thing, and I know I'm probably well beyond my credit for asking for things from you all, because you've given me your time, you've given us your investment, you've given us the opportunity. But those of you who will remember, last year I asked you guys to say goodnight to my children. And my children were here yesterday, and they got to meet the Premier, and they got to meet many of you, and they had a really good time. But if you guys can do me a favor and just say, "Good night, Smith girls," I will send this to them, and hopefully they will drift off into dreamland and they will continue living the good life they need to be. But at least it'll make me feel a little less guilty when I have that third glass of wine tonight. So on the count of 3, can you all just say, "Good night, Smith girls"? 1, 2, 3. Wow. This is so awesome, and I can't wait to get down and just get down and have some busy, and then get down. Is that? Now I know why my kids call me a geek, because that was a real awkward movement there. So I'm going to go have that third glass of wine, and I look forward to seeing you all tonight. Those who I don't see tonight, I look forward to seeing you at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Gaelic Essa.